we as an industry have been through an immense amount. And I think it speaks actually volumes to see the resilience that this industry has. I think, if you asked anyone back in March 2020 what this last 18 months or more than that is going to actually kind of be like, they might have predicted that it would have been, a real kind of bloodbath, really, really difficult times for the industry, and probably kind of irrevocably so. And I think that, we can all attest to the fact that it's been an incredibly difficult time. And it has been very, very difficult for companies to actually kind of survive. But I think what has really kind of warmed our hearts is to actually see just how innovative, how resilient, how tough this industry actually kind of is. But I think that doesn't preclude from, understanding and actually kind of appreciating the fact that this entire 18 months, we really, really believe has actually brought a dramatic change. And one of my favorite thinkers on the topic has a great quote there. I think hospitality really has changed forever. And I think it is very self-serving to say as a technology company, but I think it's correct to say that, it is now about actually kind of changing some of the things that you took for granted. It is about opening yourself up to new business models, to new ways of actually kind of operating, because this is going to usher in a really hugely dynamic change in the way that we actually kind of in the way that we operate within this industry, and there is going to be a huge risk if you don't become more agile and if you don't become more dynamic within your operations, that you might get left behind.
I'm so glad you didn't make me repeat my own quote. That would have been so awkward.
It would have been really awkward. So the question is, how is it changing? So we wanted to kind of take you through some of the 5 trends that we've seen kind of emerging, not only in our hotels, but I think, speaking to the rest of the industry. We do think that there are 5 things that we think that, are here to stay, that they're not just kind of blips to cover the last 18 months, but they're really kind of emerging trends that we really, really see. So I think the 5 that we have really is that the modern guest experience really is undergoing a huge shift. I think that not only is it changing, but the expectations are also kind of changing. So that's one side. But then also one of the things that we've really, really seen is that staffing is an issue. And we really, really have to kind of think very deeply about the employee experience that we want to kind of create. Because there is a war on talent, and we have seen that, it is maybe becoming harder and harder to convince somebody to enter the hospitality industry and to actually kind of stay there for a long period of time. Talking of long stays, we see that extended stay models really, really are blossoming, and more different types of longer stays are actually kind of emerging. And that seems to be a trend that we think will actually continue very much past the pandemic. I think with that as well, you can see that the role that payments, fintech, and the way that it kind of powers the experience to make it seamless and almost invisible is really actually kind of playing a massive role. And just talking about that kind of invisibility and seamlessness of experience, that then blends into the real estate and into the way that you design certain spaces and into the way that you actually kind of use certain spaces. So I think that, what we've really, really seen is with the rising costs of real estate, especially in kind of popular city centers and in certain parts, it's going to be about every single meter square that really, really matters, and your investors and asset owners are going to be really, really looking at that very, very deeply.
So starting with the modern guest experience, I think this pandemic, if it taught us anything, is that the guest makes decisions of where they want to travel, how they want to experience travel. And, they are the ones that hold the money, and then they get to choose which experiences win. And there has been a significant shift in that experience and what they're buying. And the question is, will we as hoteliers adapt to that, or will we follow what's happening in the market? And for a number of years, Airbnb has been out there. And there's this great quote from Brian Chesky, how the lines between traveling and living have been blurring, and they've been gaining ground, and even more so at an accelerated rate throughout this pandemic. And we feel that we shouldn't be losing against them. We own the real estate in this market. We just have to get more creative and watch what's happening out there and see how customers are requiring a space where I can sleep, but I can also work, or have a co-working space in the lobby. And I think we need to really put our foot down and say, the time of having a 15 square meter room in the center of London may not be the right thing to do anymore. And maybe we can rethink that space in the right way so that we can compete against Airbnb, because their locations or these long-term rentals are currently winning because they're set up for this blurring of lines in the travel experience. So some of the things that we've seen, and we love this term of blending and extending, right? So I've actually experienced that. I've brought my partner along on trips, and we've extended into the weekend. And therefore, I choose a hotel that I can have both business and leisure in. I really look at the facilities that hotel has, and we'll see a lot more of that blending and extending in the typical, business hotel in the city center. They're going to struggle for a long time unless they change the approach. We've seen things like kiosks and online check-in. It's just a given that you have to have these basic tools in place. But also customers don't want to pick up this square phone that's in that room and call room service, right? That you don't call anyone anymore today. You've got to have a messaging platform so that you can message or order directly online. Why do you even have to speak or converse with a person if you don't want to? And it's a lot about giving customers the choice, where we've dictated the experience often to hotels, like you will come to my reception and you will stand in the queue, and then I will staple your bills together with your receipts. We try and enable the guest to choose what experience that they want. And I think that's what the modern guest experience should be about, listening to what they're looking for. If they're looking for an eco-conscious, work with Hotels for Trees, for example, so that a customer can feel better about the trip that they have, and give back to the environment as well at the same time. I think this is one of those things that we feel very strongly about. Build it and they will come. We're all waiting for someone to lead the way, and be the one that leads the way. And we've seen some amazing examples of hotels that have, for example, taken our API and not just use our front end, and they've moved on and they said, well, what can we create? How, if I think about my hotel concept, what do I want that guest experience to be, from literally the moment that I come onto the website to enjoying that entire experience? And it is all possible. There is no excuse that the technology doesn't enable it, because it does absolutely enable it today. It's just you have to think about how you can take that to the next level. And you truly can do anything, but you have to get creative, and don't look at what your neighbor next door is doing. Try and figure out, what are customers looking for? What are your customers that you want to target looking for? Conduct customer interviews. We do a lot of this with our customers. We conduct these interviews and we just listen to how they talk about travel, and then we go back and think about our solutions. And it's the same for you in your hotel environment. Talk to the customers that you aspire to attract to the hotel, not the ones that you used to have, because they may not be the ones that you're targeting going forward. These are two really phenomenal examples. On the one side, you've got a Lazarel property in Versailles. It's probably the absolute highest end of luxury that you will find. And they deeply care about the customer data that they sit on, so they can really build a very personalized experience. And on the other side, you've got hotels like great hotels, this Concept Hotel, who have gone full self-service, but done that in such a great way so that it doesn't deteriorate the hospitality experience. And with technology, you can go across the spectrum. You don't have to go as extreme as these two examples. You can find a middle way that fits your brand, but everything is possible. And I think that's the most important message, that the technology to enable something that you want to do is already out there. We just need you to get creative and start, coming up with these ideas and executing on it. We love the Zedwell. It feels like you walk into an Apple store in London, and they've got these beautiful kiosks lined up. And that is their reception desk. They don't need some giant desk with humans standing behind it. They much more want to invest into design and the look and feel of the space. And it's a given. Customers are so used to using kiosks. I don't need to even convince anyone that it is the future. It's already there, and customers are using it, and they're happy to use it. And that's why we love the Zedwell, just because they take design and that experience that you get when you walk into the lobby first. On the other side, we've got Lifehouse, who we're huge fans of. They're this management company in the US, and they take properties and turn them around into a lifestyle space. But they have literally taken the API and built their own experience and their own technology around that core data of the customers and the reservations, and created these incredible experiences. I really think everyone should go and have a look at their website, at the beautiful lifestyle hotels that they've created, and they're expanding at record pace. And we'll have Rami later, I think, as well, joining some of the sessions. So I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah. Or do you not want to? You're going to make me read my own
This is you.
No, so and I think this all comes back because I think that me and Matt basically kind of joined joke about the fact that we've basically been building the same thing for the last 10 years. But it comes back, if you look at the first hotel with which this all started in Prague, it was exactly about this. It was about not building a reception desk and actually kind of building a stylized living room instead of a space that felt like a reception. And I think it's really about kind of creating that kind of welcome space and thinking about that welcoming procedure rather than thinking of it as a standard check-in. And I think that those all of those different examples, whether you're like Lifehouse and you want to build your own PMS basically on top of a great kind of API, or you look at it like the Zedwell basically, where they take our kind of take our kiosk, make it look beautiful, make that entire experience look exactly like an Apple store. It's just you don't have to go to the absolute extremes of all of those different cases. But I think the fact is, all of those things are possible. And if you actually understand your customers, if you understand what exactly they need, you can basically kind of build that universe around them rather than thinking about it from, this has to be there because this, we've always worked with reception desk. You can basically have that creativity to actually kind of now just go, I just want to build this experience, or this is the thing that's going to actually kind of make my customers really, really happy. And I think that it's a double-edged thing, because on the one side you basically have the customers that are coming in, but on the other side, your staff and employees. I think every single one of you will have felt their almost their kind of desires and their expectations of you as employers has really, really shifted. I think the fact that people are seeing that that there are lots of jobs out there in technology, lots of jobs they can kind of do remotely, and they can work for an American company out of the center of Europe. It really, really now means that I think that everyone is now struggling to actually kind of fill their hotels with great talent. And I think that anyone from Marriott basically to us, I think in terms of tech companies, we have to make sure that we are actually really, really thinking about that employee experience, that desirability of being actually at a great company. Those are all things that we live with day to day, and we see that this is something that basically kind of is infiltrating into every single one of the hotels. So we spend an enormous amount of time thinking about this and thinking about not just actually kind of presenting to prospective customers what exactly their experience is going to be like with us, but we have to do this also for the staff and for the employees. And we've seen some major trends basically in terms of especially when you want to kind of attract a younger audience. So I think the one thing is investing enough in your people teams, in your HR teams, basically, to make sure that you're actually kind of recruiting the right people that will actually try and stay, or try and basically kind of be there to work on your great product, that you really invest in them, basically. You then create, for example, like we have these, very good standardized onboarding procedures, basically, where we really take our time to actually kind of fully train and fully think about, all of these different things. Now, I understand that sometimes in the nature of basically that kind of that churn that you have in hospitality, it might not be completely, you might not be completely able to actually kind of do that. But it is something that I think you have to kind of look at. Same thing with salaries, benefits. Make sure that you are competing in the right way with all of the different types of companies that are basically kind of out there. Then really think about CSR initiatives. We've seen this. This is something where we get so many questions from all of our employees within Mews about what are we doing for the environment, what are we doing to make sure that this world is a better place. We think this is very important, and I'm pretty sure that this is resonating basically within your staff and employees as well. And one of the decisions that we also took very early on is that we wanted every single person at Mews to feel like they were an owner of the company, to really feel that they're responsible for actually kind of building a brand, building something kind of for the future. And I really recommend that this is something, you might not want to kind of look at it as basically being, giving out options, giving out shares and things like that. But it is very modern. And I think it is something that, you should think about as a retention bonus, basically, to help people really think about this from that perspective. And again, in real estate, in hotels, and maybe this is something much more for the smaller hotels that are out there. It is something that I think is very modern. So I think these are some of the things that we think that you should be thinking about to win the war on talent. Invest in your employee branding, rethink the way that you actually kind of think about your recruitment strategy, your pay strategy. Get as much kind of technology as you can. We use a huge amount of tools basically to automate a lot of different processes. We don't want somebody in finance basically sitting in, typing all of these things, doing payroll, doing all of these kind of different things. Try and automate as many of those processes as possible. And think about, the employee engagement, skill development, and try and match some of that outsized performance to reward. So, if you think about that kind of, even that lowly receptionist, think about, making sure that you're not over focusing on making sure that they're doing the repetitive tasks, so basically checking somebody in, but link it to, for example, the upsells, the way that they actually kind of can directly affect, the happiness of the guest. Have bonus schemes that are based on how many times they get mentioned on TripAdvisor and all of these different things. I think these are all things that we really need to actually kind of be worried about. So, we wanted to kind of, as an inspiration, Emma House is a really great concept. And the way that they've thought about automation is really, making sure that their staff are less stressed and just actually kind of happy to see every single customer. So I think that that's one of the things where you can double down on automation, and you don't have to kind of think about it as, removing the staff experience from your front offices. Think about the fact that you can kind of, remove it to a kiosk, or basically to online, and think about the fact that you're now telling your staff that they should only think about the types of conversations that they're going to have, and think about, how they can actually kind of have much more of a human experience, basically, with the guests that are arriving. But I think the third thing that we've really seen as well are long stays. It's something that I think at first a lot of hotels, basically, in hotels, hostels, short-term apartments, did basically as part of a kind of survival mechanism. But I think now you actually see this really coming to the fore. So I think that the one thing that we're really seeing is that there is a change in the concept of work. And I think that the Economist has really been kind of talking about this. I think that you've seen a lot of kind of think pieces around this, but we see it, for example, in our own company, where we had almost, I would say, about a third of our product department basically kind of relocating last winter to the Canary Islands, and just working out of there. I think that if you really think about that, basically, it's because mixed hospitality is really coming. I think that people really need to kind of think about capturing a market that is currently going to Airbnb, and we think that this is a market that really belongs to us. We shouldn't just give it away basically to Airbnb to actually kind of own, but you have to think about what you're going to do with a guest that is staying for more than 2 or 3 days, as you've been kind of used to. So rethink some of those spaces for work, for play, for yoga. Think about all of the different ways that you can actually kind of make sure that you're satisfying those guests basically for a long period of time. Thinking about building experiences, wellness programs. Think also beyond your hotel. Some of the great concepts that we've seen is for example, hotels rethinking the way that they actually work with F&B. We've seen hotels expand their offering by working with ghost kitchens, for example. There's a really great concept here in New York called, for example, Butler Hospitality, which has raised an astonishing amount of money basically to essentially kind of create customized menus basically for hotels. We've seen that, for example, in some of our hotels, like the like for example Eccleston Square, which is now kind of working in that way. But you also kind of can see it in Freehand, Generator, now really starting to offer long stays, and for a lot of people actually it's also kind of born out of the fact that a lot of the times rental prices are so high that actually hotels and hostels or any kind of any things like this actually offer a cheaper alternative and a more flexible alternative basically than setting yourself up in an apartment of your own. And you then basically really have to kind of think about working from anywhere. So think about creating spaces that can be used also for work. So in the same way that I think we've all adapted to using our bedrooms as temporary offices, think about the fact of how you can actually kind of maximize that for somebody that might be looking to actually kind of spend a week in your hotel, but actually at the same time be able to still do their work in the same way for those kind of hybrid workers. And I think with this, think about, for example, different types of offerings like subscriptions. We've seen Citizen M trying it out, and I think that there should be to the point of creativity, we should all be thinking about how we can create packages within brands, but also within individual hotels, how to kind of let your hotel be used as a kind of pied-à-terre. And you can then think of different types of occupancy models, basically, that you can then start thinking about with your with some of these kind of subscriptions and things like that. Thinking about bundles, think about bundles if somebody just wants to use the room for a few hours and things like that. It brings huge operational challenges, and we understand that. But I think again, in the spirit of trialing some of these things, working with some of these booking engines basically for some of these spaces, just see what the demand is out there, because we've really seen a surge in demand for these types of spaces basically, and customers are really looking for it, whether they're actually kind of in the city or actually outside looking to come in and use some of these spaces in the same way.
The fourth area is seamless payments and experience. I think it's really building in that entire experience in your hotel. Like, it's almost thinking about it like a budget airline where you buy the seat and then you build on that, right? There's the trolley that goes up and down with all of the different offerings. And I always wonder who's the ones buying the perfumes, but they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't making money. And they actually make a lot of profit on the perfumes, specifically in the airlines. But it's the same about our hotels, right? We're really good at selling the rooms. That is the one thing that we're always so focused on. But what about the ancillary revenue? How are you driving that in this to these new customers that want that end-to-end experience? And I think we can do so much more. And there's some really great upsell tools, but you got to package it up nicely. And I don't think we always do that in the right way. And throughout that journey, you need to really have this payment built in, so that not every time that they, walk up to buy something, it's like, can I have your credit card again? Right? That just, you should never have to ask for a credit card at any point of the journey, because they gave you that credit card at the start of it. And then at that point forward, it is completely built in, like an Uber experience is nowadays. And we see that customers have started selling interesting things like merchandise or having really iconic bars and award-winning restaurants, rather than the hotel restaurant. It's this thing that, I used to be like, oh, you don't eat at a hotel restaurant. But that isn't true anymore in a lot of cases, where the hotels have gone above and beyond to actually have a restaurant that is known in the destination and people will come to without having to book a room at the same time. And I think that's really important, that you think about your entire real estate at the hotel and rethink it, right? You don't need a lobby with a giant desk in it. That is prime real estate that you're using, where you're not making money. And maybe you could turn that space around into a shop or into a bar that people can work at, or even a co-working space, right? So the way that Richard talked about extending stays, and I know that he's going, where are you going for the winter again, for a month?
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, right? So he's going to be there for a month, but our life is on these calls, and you need good Wi-Fi, you need a desk, and you just don't get that in a hotel room nowadays, unless it's a hotel room that is really thought about. I don't want to have a bed in my background at all times on these calls. I want to have a good background, good lighting, etc. And it's important that you truly think about the real estate, your lobby. How can you make that work for these new customers? One prime example is the Dylan, one of my absolute favorite hotels in Amsterdam. And it has a fantastic location. And you actually, when you book that, there is so many restaurants out there, but actually the restaurant that they have is Michelin star. It's phenomenal. So you actually never have to leave the hotel, even though you're in a prime location. And I think that's really, don't think, oh, we're in a great location, so I don't need to put an effort into my services. Actually, if you do, people will appreciate it and they will use it. And when you go to the Dylan, it's very hard to get a table at this hotel, because they are generally booked round the clock. And it is possible to use that real estate in a much smarter way. And the last pillar that we have is maximizing your physical real estate. I guess we've been talking about that already for the last few times, but the times of RevPAR, where you talk about your hotel and you talk about the revenue that you have per available room, to basically say, hey, we're doing better than this hotel because of the RevPAR. It isn't, right? A metric that's much more interesting is revenue, or GOPAR, or GOPAM, gross operating profit per available square meter that you have. But really think about the real estate in your hotel and think how you can measure the success of it. And maybe a hostel in one building makes more sense, but what if you would flip it to a hotel? Would it make more money per square meterage if you turn that concept around? And I think it's about the ability to be flexible and shaking up your model and rethinking your property. We had a hotel in Prague, Mosaic House, that joined us as a hostel very early on. And the owner actually said, I think if I flip this to a hotel, a good designed 4-star hotel, I can make a lot more money. And they have. And it looks amazing. And the success rate of that particular property is better. And I'm not saying that we should flip all hostels and hotels, because sometimes it makes more sense to turn it into a hostel. But you need to really make sure that you have the technology in place so that you can get much more flexible with your space and run tests, right? At Mews, we don't just deploy a feature to everyone. We just build a feature, we test it with a few players, and then those, if they adopt it well, we're like, right, we could now roll this out to the rest. And it's the same with your rooms. If you could flip one room and try out something different, like put a co-working space in, or put a hostel space into that, you can get really flexible and see what works, what doesn't work. But if you're not testing, you'll never know the answer to it. Like, I love the example of Eccleston Square, who turned their kitchen into a ghost kitchen so that they can actually make more money from the restaurant space that was, not necessarily making that much money. But one of our absolute favorite customers is the student hotels, who have taken accommodation for students to the next level. They have blended student accommodation, like students come in for a semester, with short stay. So they have rooms that can turn from a student room into a short stay room, so that they can sell that directly on the website. The moment the student checks out, they turn that into a short stay room. But you can also buy extended stay even if you're not a student. They've got co-working spaces, so you create a community in the lobby of these hotels of a myriad of types of customers. But a lot of them are students who are very engaging. So you create a really exciting atmosphere in the lobby. They've got lots of meeting rooms and lots of events and drink space. And I think they've really thrived in the pandemic, where, if you have such a dynamic business mix and one falls away, like at the time, hotel customers dropped very quickly. But long stays, they were set up for long stays, and they immediately were able to switch their model because they had this really flexible hybrid model. And it's fantastic to see how they've thrived in the pandemic because they have a very flexible approach to real estate.
I think that's really kind of the key. I think it's time to rethink the way that you think about hospitality, rethink your occupancy, rethink the way that you think about, even high season, low season. Think about, what time of year is actually going to be, is my real estate going to be more suited for this type of customer? And how can I actually kind of build in that resiliency basically to my model, so that we don't catch ourselves kind of unaware in the same way that I think we have been basically for the last year and a half. And I think it's really kind of about rethinking the type of hotel, the type of accommodation that you would like to actually kind of offer to this modern guest.